Maybe the campaigns are just not resonating with your audience. Maybe you're using the wrong channel. Maybe this audience is not receptive to all your social media engagement. They couldn't care less.
Hello, listeners, viewers. It is a pleasure to be here with you today. It's my honor to present Sabine Moeller, top-line growth engineer, data-driven transformer and strategist, and global marketing and customer experience executive at Modern Growth Exchange. Sabine, it is a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Jason. Pleasure is on my side.
And thought we'd begin by familiarizing the audience with your background and your path here today.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to your listeners. I love your podcast, so thank you for having me today.
My pleasure.
I would say my background is, I'm a data-driven growth engineer, so I try to find some truth in the data that could be, customer data, that could be internal data, and I try to find strategies that help companies to grow. And I pretty much have been doing this my whole career. I started off at really large companies with a typical entry-level job. So, I was a business analyst, and I pretty much quickly found my interest in the world of big data. Even back then when I started, there was not, that term wasn't created yet, right? I mean, we still had black screens with green writing on it, right? So
sure.
email was almost not a thing, right? So it was a while ago. But I did get my Lean Six Sigma black belt really quickly. And I was dealing with salespeople from the beginning of my career. And sales folks have the tendency not to believe you anything, right? They say, look, we know how it works. We know how to grow the business. Leave us alone with your tips, right? And so one thing I learned is if I can measure, weigh it, or count it, even the most stubborn sales guy might actually acknowledge maybe there's a flaw in his system or overall in the system, or there's an opportunity for additional growth. If you can prove it to them with data, they're going to believe you and they might change their ways. So that was a really early experience. And as you can imagine, that moved relatively quickly over the decades from, Lean Six Sigma black belt. I don't think anyone talks about that anymore. All the way to machine learning and AI, which is kind of the last stage in my venture where I learned how to translate this generated data from machine learning algorithms into growth strategies. So, and I've worked for a lot of big companies like Allianz Global Investors, PIMCO. Then I did an excursion into the consulting world, worked for Oliver Wyman, then went back into the corporation, worked at Mercer. And now I'm in a really entrepreneurial environment with the Modern Growth Exchange. We're a small team, we're all entrepreneurs. We try to grow our own business. So I kind of see, a lot of the pain that smaller companies and startups go through. And we work with small companies and big companies. So my current client, two of my current clients, they're between 25 employees and 25,000.
Quite a range there. And it was emphasized in my notes from our conversations, the differentiators from 20 to 25,000. What does that look like? Are the startups more receptive, and I'm using the word startup broadly, more receptive to the data? I like to say the only way to measure is with numbers. And like you said, the salespeople who think they know everything, and I know some of those folks, are they more responsive at that level? Or is it the large organizations that are more buttoned up and seasoned and can be looked at as a well-oiled machine?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jason. I mean, large companies tend to be less nimble than small companies, right? So in a large company, everything takes super long. You have to involve a ton of stakeholders, but they also have the luxury that they have more resources overall and more skills and knowledge that smaller companies do not have, right? They have in certain areas, they have, just a broad array of talent, right, and resources. But everything takes longer because it has to go through 5 levels of approvals. In a small company, typically where the owner is also, the decision maker, maybe also the inventor, he does it all, you can get a commitment much faster. However, if that one decision maker, owner, inventor, CEO, president, all in one person, if they do not like what you have to say, then you just have no chance to convince them. I mean, you can try, right? But my current customer, actually, that is small with a 25 person organization, they are just amazing. I mean, you get responses within minutes. They know, they have been in the market for a long time, for decades, so they're not a startup, so they know the drill, right? And they're in the service business. So that makes it also a little bit easier because they do understand the customer experience, and the customer as such is in the center of all their daily operations.
There's more of a connection. They work firsthand with the customer and can have a better idea of what the customer will respond to. Working with large organizations, you said there's more resources, but there's 5 levels of approval that are needed. Mm-hmm. What has been most impactful in those conversations to get those approvals? I know we talked about the data and the numbers, and there's assumptions going in, but the data is what we need to show, what's working and where we need to drive decisions, where we need to drive the next efforts. What really resonates with the larger organizations?
Yeah, I would say it's 2 things. Is you got to have coalitions, right? Early on, you need to build coalitions. You need to find the one guy, the decision maker in the organization who really likes, let's say, a data-driven approach, is open to it, made some good experiences in the past. And, my second advice would be to run a pilot, right? I mean, the podcast is test optimized scale. So that's exactly what, the secret sauce is. So test with a pilot, create a success story, find a multiplier, have a coalition, and then expand it further into the organization.
What does a pilot typically consist of? What type of data are you pulling out? What can be said about verbal communications, and how can AI be used to extract info that is meaningful and actionable?
Yeah, oh wow, that's a lot of questions all in one. So, I typically pick a pilot, let's say if we have to do a customer segmentation, or if we need to differentiate a growth strategy, if you have a couple of options, right? I would go with the most important segment. Tier your customers, use like the Pareto chart, find the 5%, 10 or 20% of the customers that drive 80% of the revenue, or something along those lines. And there's always, in every company, regardless of size, there's always the 1, 2, or handful of customers that are important. So start with them. If you feel they're good candidates, right? And it depends a little bit on the project whether they're good candidates, but you do want to have like an initial impact, and then you look for the next best generation, or the next best selection of customers to do the work with. You could, in some instances, you can also do a bottoms up approach if you do not feel comfortable, if you really have no idea what the customer is open to do. It depends a little bit on the strategy, but typically, I pick who is the most important customer. Are they open to try something new? Are they open for a new approach? Are they open for a dialogue? And then we start with them.
I do that with advertising quite a bit. And the reason I'm a fan of advertising, first and foremost, the scalability, but I'm able to segment the results and identify pockets of performance. So I could say, hey, only 1% of the audience is clicking on an advertisement. Who are they? And then what do they do once they get to the funnel? They click, they get to the next part of the digital environment, and how are they converting from there? maybe that's the end conversion. Maybe it's a mid-funnel conversion. And it could be as simple as identifying the most valuable audiences based on that first conversion, but perhaps it's a partnership. Perhaps it's a user that's going to have, depending on the audience, depending on the KPI performance indicator, a larger lifetime value. So I really need to be continuing to monitor, and 6 months, 12 months later, I'm able to see drastic differences in continuations and therefore the lifetime value. But it's about identifying those specific individuals and maybe what target markets they represent and how we can shift our focuses accordingly. So doing this and seeking out the 5 to 10% that are producing 80% of the results, and you're finding the most important, and through that segmentation, I can speak firsthand on how valuable that is. And if you're able to do that in the pilot, like you said, optimize it to the best ability and then scale that pilot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the funnel management, right? I mean, that is critical. I mean, first of all, knowing your funnel, right? Know where you stand with your prospects, with your hand raisers, with your customers. Having also different means to engage with them, right? Because a hand raiser, a prospect needs a different treatment plan than a customer that you want to retain or grow. And I see, even at big companies, I do not always see a very, rule-based funnel management, right? They think they know what they do, but they don't. If you look at the funnel, for example, that might be managed with a big system like Salesforce or any other CRM system. You'll look into it, and you sometimes have billions of dollars of stale, old opportunities in there that have been sitting there for years and no one does anything with it. So the funnel looks good, and then they're wondering why they're not converting anything, right? Because they're not having any velocity in the funnel, they're not moving anything, and they're also not cleaning out all the opportunities. So I see that all the time. You have a very top-heavy funnel, but no movement, no advancement, right? And in marketing specifically, you need to address the different stages completely different, right? I mean, top of the funnel obviously is a lot of social media, it's a lot of advertising, it's like creating the brand awareness and also shaping the brand recognition, right? You do want to shape the message, like what are you known for? What are your offerings, right? So we typically measure this with guided and unguided brand awareness, right? If I ask you today on the street, Jason, hey, how do you know brand X, Y, and Z? And you say, oh, I love it. Absolutely. I buy their products all the time. Then you succeeded in creating brand awareness and brand recognition. And then, obviously the last step is the conversion, right? So is Jason willing to purchase from us, which goes then into the funnel management, typically done with other marketing measures and the sales folks, right? I mean, that's where they come into the play to convert the marketing qualified leads, how we talk about them, to sales qualified leads, and then just close the deal. So there's a lot of theory behind that, and I kind of visualize the funnel. I see in so many companies, not even like a visualization of the funnel, which is like the easiest way to understand where the issue is, like where the opportunity is stuck, right? Is it top heavy? Is it medium, belly heavy, or is the bottom of the funnel like really thin? Like where's the issue? I mean, you can almost read a funnel, the shape of the funnel, and the data in the funnel. You can read this like a book, almost like a cookbook for action. I get obviously super excited about funnel management, so forgive me if that was way too long.
We share that passion, and I like the cookbook. I like the cookbook for the funnel itself and cookbook for action, because I do believe, even just looking at average percentages for how many of the audiences at each stage of the funnel, upper, mid, lower, and I look at lower, repeat conversion, advocacy, and what that looks like years later at that. I like how you pointed out brands often forget about who's in their funnel. and are not interacting, especially on the B2B side, with individuals, prospects, organizations that had engaged with them years back. And
Mhm.
I used to always reference this stat in marketing workshops that I lead, where most salespeople, and I like making these offline to online comparisons. So it's just saying offline, most salespeople don't follow up with the prospect more than 3 times. And it shows
Mhm.
that X of percent do, 1 follow up, 2, 3. I think it's 10% that do 5 follow ups or more. Meanwhile, most conversions, most purchases, most sales happen somewhere between touch point 7 and touch point 12. And
That's right.
it's they're reversing different metrics. Meanwhile, the follow up can be forgotten in many different marketing campaigns,
Mhm.
or given up on pretty quick. Digital allows for scale. Digital allows for automation. Digital allows us to have 7 follow-up messages, to retarget
Absolutely.
3 times a day, and be intentional about what messaging, what updates, what recognition we want the audience to be aware of for us, and how that could drive them to conversion. And then the
Mhm.
analytics, that cookbook, tell us everything we need to know of, hey, once they get to this stage of the funnel, if we talk about our awards, if we talk about these new partnerships, if we talk about price and promotion, we will see a lift in conversion. But
Mhm.
without knowing what you're playing for, without some projections for the analytics you're looking to see at each stage, without goals for audience size, and how long that audience is valid for, a year, 2 year, 5 year type retargeting and follow up as part of the strategy, you're leaving performance on the table.
Absolutely. And Jason, you mentioned a little bit earlier the power of AI, right? I
Yes.
mean, with these touch points, and it's funny that you say 7 touch points because that's my experience too. Like wherever I go, it's like the magic number. It takes 7 touch points before you get a decision, either the thumbs up or the thumbs down, right? But that's kind of, it seems to be a universal number. And
Sure.
with the power of AI nowadays, you can make these experiences, these touch points, really relevant because you can send them personalized content. You can analyze the behavior from the past, like what were the touch points in the previous 12 months. Where's the interest? What is the need? It doesn't need to be the sales guy doing all these follow-ups by himself and calling all the time, or crafting an email. I mean, a lot of these marketing systems, they can do that in an automated fashion today. And it doesn't have to be like a super fancy tool. I mean, the fancy tools, they can do it, even better, but I'm sure there are tools out there beyond, let's say, Marketo or Eloqua, and so that can do that.
Marketing automation and going beyond automation to apply machine learnings to
Mm-hmm.
then continue to enhance the content that is going out. I'm really impressed with some of these video platforms that allow for customization. So it can be the CEO speaking to
Mm-hmm.
the prospect, or even the audience at large, and
Yeah.
the name, the organization that they're with, the last time they
Mm-hmm.
spoke, can all be personalized, and it looks like that individual speaking to them. I think it's even scary to think what those communications could look like years down the line. But I so glad you pointed out, customization, personalization, and different types of delivery positions that allow for a stronger
Mm-hmm.
response rate.
Yeah, and I mean, amongst us marketing folks, right? I mean, that gets us into the whole new topic of persona-based marketing, right? You really want to understand what does the customer journey look like for different types of people, right? For different personas. And Jason, you might have different needs than I have, right? And we both have different expectations along those moments of truth in the customer journey. And we might have different touch points too. You might be the digital guy, and I might be the person who likes the personal interaction. And you can get this transparency nowadays with systems, and you can create these personas and then customize the marketing. I mean, there's just no way around it anymore. No one wants to get like irrelevant messages where they don't feel like, well, this might work for Jason and everyone else, but that's not what I want. That's not what I need. And it's not, and it doesn't mean it's like you have to identify 5, 10, 15 personas. It's in most companies, it comes down to 2 or 3. Really,
Yeah,
you just have to understand these 2 or 3 very distinct personas.
absolutely. I know for me these days, and it's true for many target audiences, exclusivity, price, and social proof. If I feel like everyone is using a product, if I feel like there's something that is available for a limited time, and then price. I buy media. I'm a smart shopper. I've been able to have purchase price equate to much lower cost per acquisition results of clients' key audiences and much stronger return on ad spends accordingly. It's ingrained to an extent. So if I have an element of exclusivity, price, and social proof, and that's just what I'm conscious of, I'm sure there's many marketing messages that I respond to that I'm not aware of. I'm not even mentioning anything around fear here. So that's just what I'm physically aware of. But being able to see with the analytics, we have assumptions, but the data needs to show us what's working.
That's right.
You can find the right 2 to 3 audiences, as you're mentioning, have a marketing automation platform. You mentioned Marketo. I know there's HubSpot, Klaviyo, these are all tools. It's a whole matter of how you use the tools. I've seen large organizations misuse their CRM and, all of the different automations available. I've seen small organizations create amazing conversation flows and outstanding levels of performance and comparison industry averages accordingly. So it's all how you use them, but it begins, as you mentioned, with that customer segmentation and understanding what types of personalized messaging those audiences are going to respond to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned, this whole personalization. I think you insinuated, also the willingness to pay, is higher when you feel like you have a tailored experience, right? And the better the customer experience for you as a specific persona is, the more you're willing to pay more for it too, because you feel like you get real value for what you pay for. And that's what a lot of companies are overlooking. Companies tend to be super paranoid about raising prices, right? When they have been in the business, they have their trusted customer base, and they feel like, well, we really need to keep up with inflation. We have innovations. They're always afraid of asking more. And, they shouldn't be afraid to do that, because if they can prove the value of their services or products, they can ask for more, and customers are always willing to pay for more. I mean, statistics show over and over again, if they feel that they get the value, they're willing to pay more for. Now, the big question then is, how do you define value? But I think that's where the personas really help, because we might know, Jason, you love digital experiences. So if you get everything personalized, if you get follow-ups in a digital format, you get exactly what you want, what you need, and it's differentiated from what the other guys offer, then you're willing to pay more.
Correct. And I make the offline-online comparisons. My wife and I, we got married last year, we bought a home last year. We've had to make 100 purchases for the home ever since, and a lot of service providers that call me directly. And the ones that create that personalized experience for me, the value's more clear. They make adjustments as needed to their product, and I'm much happier with it, and would be willing to pay more in some cases.
And then they throw in some rewards for you as a frequent shopper, right? For the specific product you love so much, right? Then you spend even more. You buy 2 or 3 pairs.
Absolutely.
Your favorite sneakers or something else. And it always works like that. I mean, the human psyche just works like that. When you feel like you get good value, you tend to spend more. When you feel like, wow, I'm getting something I cannot get anywhere else, and I also don't want to miss this opportunity because I just got this great deal on it. It always works. It works for me too. I mean, I know all the data tricks, I know all the marketing tricks, but I fall for it too. It's fun. It's like, why not, right?
And as long as the value's there, as you mentioned, I was taught business is the monetization of value. How is value defined? What is the proper monetization of that value? There are different approaches, but if the value is present, continuation, scaling of the monetization side of it can be very present. On the digital side, there's this shirt company and they sell packs and they're the best. The cloth, the professional look, their pricing, and they get you at the right times and with the right messaging that speaks to me. I don't feel like I'm buying an athletic brand. I feel like it's made for people in tech in Los Angeles, or whatever it may be, and it's all the narrative that they're choosing. How do you determine the messaging? We're talking about how messaging resonates offline, online, the voice of the customer, the voice the customer responds to. What do you use this data for to then shape the automations, the AI? But how do you get that narrative dialed?
Yeah, I love, here's my keyword, voice of the customer. I love it. You're going to probably cut me off because, that's one of my favorite topics. I mean, a good way to find out what the customers want is just ask them, right? I mean, don't be like super bland in how you ask them what they want, right? But have a sophisticated voice of the customer survey. And not the thing, after you browse on the website, hey, how do you like our experience? You want our newsletter? No, that's not what I'm talking about. It's more about be very specific, say why you're doing this. We really want to improve our services and offerings, and please spend 5 or 6 or 7 minutes max to help us do that. If you can do that with your customers, you get so many valuable insights. And it's not the question, do you like it, yes or no, right? It needs to be very specific along the customer journey. And the way you draft these questions to ask the customers is by using a lot of internal insights as well. So typically, I would start any project by doing a lot of stakeholder interviews because the team and the companies, they know the customers pretty well, right? And if you get 10, 20 viewpoints, you have a pretty good idea of what's going on, right? Because they get constant customer feedback and they can create hypotheses. Step 2 is I look at the data, right? I look, what does the engagement look like? What do customers prefer? What do they do, right? And then we can come up with a rather sophisticated, it's not a one-size-fits-all survey, and we ask them, hey, what is your preference? What are your experiences? What are your needs? Where needs gaps? If you can, ask them about what's the positioning of the specific company against the competitors. Who is the main competitor and why? Right? You can ask all these questions, and customers, I would say 10 to 20% of the customers are willing to share this information, especially when you give them the opportunity to stay anonymous. And I typically drive great insights out of that. Combining the internal with the outside in view. You get that you can create amazing messages that are spot on. And and then typically what you can also do once you have certain touch points established, you can always add a little plug-in survey there as well, right? For example, at the invoicing process, or if someone drops the shopping cart, right? Ask them, hey, and you see that happens all the time. Hey, you forgot something in your shopping cart. I think what you want to do is also ask, what's going on? Did you have difficulty with the experience, right? With the checkout, or was there something? How can we make it easier? And I know actually some of the bigger platforms, the customer experience platforms, they all introduced new tools now where you can track like rage clicking, which I think is really cool, because that's even better. It addresses the silent majority, right? Because knowing that only 10 or 20% of your customers respond to your survey, you want to know, how do the other 80% think, right? Especially if you might not reach statistical significance with your sample size, you do want to understand, well, what's with the silent majority? And there's some tools out there now that track exactly what the cursors are doing, where a customer might be stuck, where they start to rage click, where they abandon the website altogether, for example. Those are great ways to find out what's wrong, what's broken in your system, and what you need to do to customize the experience, right? And sorry, I went a little off topic from the messaging, but
No, this is great.
it's pretty much, ask the customer. I mean, that's what I would say. I try to ask the customer and combine that with the wisdom and the insights you have within your own organization.
Closed loop. Ask the customers, ask them the questions in depth, not just the ones that you want to ask. Look at those 10 to 20 different viewpoints. Don't just speak to them and get what they could think about consciously, but also look at the data, have heat maps, have other tools set up so you can see exactly what people are doing on both mobile and desktop. Laptop devices, and get an understanding of how to talk to each audience accordingly. And it amazes me how many marketers, founders, upper management boards are not conducting these types of activities or aware of the results that they produce. Perhaps we work on a lot of campaigns that are targeting investors, and have recently, not always, developed programs to survey investors and have them create a video analyzing the offering page. So they're able to point out flaws, question marks, what's resonating, and really landing with them. What sounds a little, like fluff or an exaggeration, and why or why not they would invest. And we're seeing investments come out of it, which is great. But I'm really just looking for the actual feedback in that closed loop system to shape the next iteration of the deal, of the offering page. And this is for an audience that I was told would not respond to these types of survey questions. So I think it's all about how it's presented as well. Like you mentioned, hey, we're able to use this info to create a better experience, and it's 5 to 7 minutes, and it's all about the presentation, I find.
Yeah, it is about the presentation. And I mean, look, during COVID, a lot of companies started to send customer surveys and questionnaires. So we did see a little bit of fatigue setting in, right? So that's why it's even more important that you have a clear, crisp message, keep it short.
Sure.
But still relevant, right? And find ways, just as you just mentioned as well, find ways to analyze data, behavioral data, to get the insights, on top of asking them. But, there's so much data out there today around the customer, the 360 view, around what they're consuming, what the touch points are, what they're doing, how you interact with them. I think every company should be able to find ways to draw insights and strategic recommendations from their data. And, you mentioned a little bit earlier, you said, well, you're surprised why not more are doing it. Well, I think we probably both know why not, right? Because sometimes the inconvenient truth surfaces, right? And not a lot of companies are willing and able to handle it.
I was guessing, they don't want to know the answers in some cases, but it's how you improve. It's how you position to be a market leader. And I believe it determines who's going to hold more market share in the next stages, in the next years to come.
Yeah. And, we typically gain the most insights from customers that are lapsed, previous customers. Or, for example, if you run a win-loss survey after a deal, right, you can do that too. We learn the most from those deals that were lost. And, facing that honest feedback, that's hard. It's not easy. But, sometimes it helps the sales folks too. I worked at one company where we did introduce a win-loss survey for the first time. And we got on pretty much all the deals, the won and the lost deals feedback. And the best insight was, the salespeople, I think they tend to say, well, it was the price, we just didn't get enough discount, and, we lost because of the price. It wasn't the price, it was the price value perception. So, and it wasn't always the number one reason. Depending a little bit on the product, it was a lot of times the product performance or the testing. And that was, good news for the sales folks. They did not know that. They thought, well, we just didn't give them a large enough discount. And I have rarely seen cases in like 2 or 3 companies where we ran win-loss surveys where that's the number one reason. It's not the price. If anything, it's the price value and or product performance. Most of the times, product performance even above price value perception. I mean, it goes together anyway, right? I mean, if the product is not good, not meeting expectations, then of course you're not willing to pay for it, right?
I really like the way it's worded, price value perception. I have not used that phrase. I have my business development team meeting on Wednesdays. I'll be, speaking with them about it because it's true. We are willing to pay more for value. We don't want to be overcharged. We don't want to waste time, effort, resources on products that are going to underperform and have our guards, have our instincts towards that. So are we conveying the value so that the audience can perceive it to be underpriced? And are we showing the product performance and tests in a way that's very easy to understand? Yeah.
And one of the things I see a lot when we work, regardless of how big the company is, right? When we ask the teams to put themselves in the shoes of the customer, to see the price value or the product quality from their perspective, that's usually a very tricky experience. It takes them a while to warm up to this idea, to let go their own beliefs and put themselves in the shoes of Jason, right? And just think about how does he feel? What does he say? And how does he behave? And why? Right? That is not an easy thing to do. But once you crack the code on that, I think, getting back to your question also on messaging, right? All of a sudden, it's much easier. If we understand Jason's motivation and his perception, then you have the recipe for messaging and for engagement.
Correct. We'll be able to use the words for that audience that resonate. We're looking at the surveys, taking what one individual is sharing and choosing to then use that narrative to message an entire audience, the demographics, target that you're going after, knowing that they fit a similar profile and this will likely weigh heavily with them. So, Sabine, I'm taking notes and really enjoying the discussion here. For listeners, viewers who are looking to apply these learnings, this knowledge to their own campaigns, to their own growth, what recommendations would you have for them? I look at marketing as a series of tests. What can they test towards their own evolution?
Yeah, I mean, I probably would start with, do they know who they are, right? Do they know what the brand stands for? Why do they exist? What do they do and how do they do it? That's typically a really good, and you can do that internally. I mean, that is something, with someone who has done that before with some motivation, they can do that. They can brainstorm that, right? Is that clear to everyone? Does everyone share that? And then look at it depends a little bit at what stage they are, right? How many customers do they have? How many prospects are there? Like, do they have a solid base already? Really look at their customers. What do we know about our customers? What data do we have? What do we know about their needs and motivations, right? And how do we bring our message across? I mean, do the customers also perceive us as what we think who we are, right? Because if not, then they're not going to buy from us. So, and that's where you can bring together. I would always look, after a little bit of brand studying who we are, I would look at the customer data. And, that can be an Excel spreadsheet, that can be like a CRM system. It can be the general ledger, right? I mean, what the customers buy. It doesn't have to be super sophisticated. And, and as the next step, if you really want to find out more because you're stuck, maybe you're not that sure about your customer experience across the customer journey, then ask them, put in listening posts or send them a survey. And there are tools out there that don't cost much, or they're, like the good old Survey Monkey or so, and the other tools as well. I probably would go with a version, I'm not sure, I think it's like 25 or so a month, like the next upgrade from the free version, because it gives you more capabilities. Even the big platforms like Qualtrics, I think they have a license for like $400 or so a month that gives you like amazing capabilities. So it doesn't have to be like big ticket items to listen to your customers. And the same on machine learning and AI, right? There's many outsourcing opportunities. If you feel like you want to just run some algorithms to understand, what customers are at risk, then, there are guys offshore that can do that for a rather low rate. And, there's a whole different topic around, well, is the data scientist as important as the database administrator? And I would always say, no, the person who puts the data together is actually more important than the data scientist. But, that's a whole different topic.
I was taught the data is only as good as what you do with it.
Yeah.
So having, the right scientist, the right captain behind the wheel can make all the difference. I was taught much younger as a kid too. I mean, all the information's available online these days. It's a matter of what you do with that information, not just being knowledgeable of it. So if you're just holding this data internally and not making changes around it, it's not going to produce the results you're looking for. But these are great recommendations with really understanding your brand, who you are, what your function is, how others perceive you first, then moving to customers and really dissecting their needs, their interests, holding different surveys. So you're not just basing it on your own perception. And then looking to run a series of AI tests, outsourcing if needed, but making sure that you have the right data scientist involved so you could determine how you can use these tools for maximum impact towards your brand. What about if it's not working right out of the gate, or just even, want to improve? Performance has plateaued, whatever it may be. What are the best approaches towards optimization? And I find this to be as far as marketers go, where marketing talent really shines, a good problem solver. How would you recommend for the audience to go about optimizing, even pivoting their own campaigns?
Well, I almost hate to say it, but look at the data, right? Look at the engagement data, because then obviously something is not working, right? If you're plateauing, either the funnel doesn't advance, or you're running out of ideas how to grow your customer base, or maybe you have a leaky bucket, right? And the customers are not renewing, or they're purchasing less from you. You need to find out why. And, look at the data, look at the engagement data. Maybe the campaigns are just not resonating with your audience. Maybe you're using the wrong channel. Maybe this audience is not receptive to all your social media engagement. They couldn't care less. I mean, you should see that, right? You have like the click-through rates and all that. So hopefully, and if you do not have the data, then again, I would probably talk to a bunch of customers, right? Hey, what's going on? And what I also see is, well, I'm a big fan of surveys, is especially when you give the customers the opportunity to respond anonymously. They tell you things they would not tell the sales guy. Not because they don't like the sales guy, it's because they like the sales guy. They don't want to tell the sales guy, look, your website really sucks, or I can't find information. that I really need. Or, maybe you have like a customer portal and you're like, I really hate this customer portal. They might not be open to tell you that because they like you. And they also don't want the sales guys to get in trouble, right? So we typically see more honest feedback coming from an anonymous survey, actually, than direct engagements. And, I hear a lot where we really know what the customers want and, no, that's not what they want. Well, if you plateau, then obviously something doesn't work. Something is not right. And maybe you do not know what they want because then otherwise you would grow, and maybe it makes it also easier to face the inconvenient truth in some instances, right? Because if there's really trouble with the product, not just with the way you communicate with the customers or the channels or the marketing, maybe it's a product problem, then you got to understand that too.
I like how you put in the anonymous factor. We're in search of the data. We want to be able to make meaningful changes. And that's the whole goal here. It's not ego. It's not vanity metrics as much as how can we improve what tomorrow looks like for the brand, for the campaign. Yeah. And these are excellent recommendations towards it. And as we look at the question of scale, we've now learned who we are as a brand, who our customers are, how we're using AI. We've been able to optimize and take anonymous, customer client feedback to improve what we're doing on an ongoing basis. How do we scale? Any tips, any examples? I know you've worked with Fortune 500s and companies that entered into engagements with you at lower points and then grew substantially. Any stories or recommendations you could provide us around scaling a business?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to scale is to cross-sell and upsell, right? Sell more or sell something else that you offer. So I would look at similar types, like what does the profile look like of a customer who purchased more? And then find similar types, right? And you obviously need to know why. Why did they purchase more? Was there a need, right? So again, you can find the lookalikes to scale up, but based again on insights, not because you want them to purchase more, because you know that it might be a good fit for them, right? Based on the needs. And the other topic, of course, is innovation, which is more challenging, right? But I was actually just pulling out a quote today from Larry Page for different contexts. And what he said is, I need to read that to you. You need to get to the future ahead of your customers and be ready to greet them when they arrive.
I like that.
Yeah. So, I first thought it was a quote maybe from Tim Cook from Apple, but then I was, it's Larry Page Google. That's interesting, right? Because that's kind of what we know from Apple. They were always ahead of their customers. No, but I think Larry has a good point here, right? That's not that easy because no one knows what the future looks like. But again, you can work with your customers to also find out, right? If you feel like your engineers have the next big thing going, they feel super excited. Maybe they have the new, a new generation of electric batteries that don't blow up anymore, then talk to your customers, run a pilot, involve them in the process, get them excited. And then roll it out. The worst thing is if you spend a lot of time and money and effort in an innovation that no one wants, or you're too early, or there's all kinds of stories of failed innovations because you were just not there at the right time, right? So need just to play along with Larry Page here, right? Like kind of bring them with a little bit along the way, right? I mean, they might arrive there, but stay in touch with them.
That relationship, that audience, the most valuable part for a business conducting themselves online, for a company with a large database of B2B clients, prospects. And I just love that concept of introduce your audiences to the future, be ahead of them, be there to greet them once they get there. We've been able to do that at times with marketing channels. In other cases, have learned about it and then are catching up. And I know I've been turned off by brands who are announcing something that I've already been using for years from other companies. So it's all about that positioning, the cross-selling, upselling, and being involved, being at the forefront of what's to come. Larger companies have resources to do it. Smaller companies are more nimble and could get there quicker. But who gets there first? It could be anyone's game for any vertical.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you just said about, and don't think the customer is stupid and doesn't know. I think that's super important, right? Because I don't know whether I'm allowed to give an example, but Delta Airlines said, "Hey, you're getting free Wi-Fi now on our planes. Like, how awesome is that? We're the first ones." No, they were not the first ones. So I've been flying JetBlue for decades, and as long as I can remember, they had free Wi-Fi on their planes. And you don't even need to be like a customer loyalty club member, which you have to be a Delta. So I felt really like, a fool. It was like, no, guys, your marketing message is totally off. And I'm sure there are other airlines that have free Wi-Fi, like.
And if they would have spoken to you, following your recommendations, you may have been able to tell that to them, and their messaging could have been something more along the lines of, "We also have free Wi-Fi now," or something that has, cleverness and personalization to who they're speaking to, versus pretending they've invented the concept of free Wi-Fi.
Yeah. And, like all my friends I talked to who are like frequent flyers, they knew that.
Yeah.
Maybe they banked on the people who are just not flying that often and don't know. And, I don't know. I certainly, I would have pointed something else out. Maybe you have the most modern fleet. Maybe they have the most punctual planes or whatever. You find something you can point out as valuable and a differentiator, right? But I don't think the customers don't know. And,
Finally, free Wi-Fi on a premium airline, because now you're speaking to Delta. I associate premium in comparison to other airlines, and that they have Wi-Fi, and that they didn't just come up with it. It's finally happening there. There's so many different angles they could have used, and probably with that closed loop system and testing. And I don't know enough about the situation. Maybe they did focus group it out, but it's great to point out.
Yeah.
Well, Sabine, I want to be respectful to your time. I'm enjoying our marketing discussion here, having learnings myself. I'm certainly going to be talking about, price value perception and how it can be the biggest driver for lost deals. I like even just the wording of win-loss survey on top of, anonymous surveys, and really going back to the fundamentals for campaigns. I want to have our listeners, viewers, set up to learn more. If you have more content that you want to point them to, I know in my learnings it was the customer voice, so I wanted to bring that up. But where can the audience go to learn more, and what are some final thoughts that you'd like to leave everyone with today?
Yeah, they can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, and then we can start a conversation. I think that's the easiest way, and and I can send on an individual base some more information. So I think that that probably makes the most sense right now. And I would say my final words are, perceptions drive decisions, whether you like it or not. But that's the reality for us marketers.
Perceptions drive decisions, even more than facts at times. Perceptions drive decisions. Excellent.
All right, Jason.
Well, Sabine, thank you so much for taking the time to join the pod today. You are a wealth of information, and speaking on behalf of the listeners, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jason, for having me, and great conversation. We could probably go on for another couple of hours.
It's true. Absolutely. Thank you again, viewers, listeners. Thank you. We will see you next time. Take care.